G'day folks, I want to talk about fuels and different fuels and some of the reasons why I've stuck with the PUMP98, we call it here, and versus the E85. I've had a lot of people sort of comment on suggesting I go to E85, and I did consider it in the earlier days, sort of in the last 12 months, but realistically it was coming down to swapping the fuel lines out because they're not compatible for E85, the ethanol blend, and the carburettor. I would have had to go and get a one compatible, and all that sort of jazz. So at the end of the day, swapping it all out, it was going to cost a little bit of money. And the benefits are with the E85 are really good, and I'm not taking anything away from it. A lot of people are having really good, making good horsepower with it, and all that jazz. But for me, because we live in a colder climate, and it's only sort of in the last 12 months I've realised that it is a slow burn fuel, E85, and I noticed the difference with this engine with the octane boost in it. And they say that, and I'll show you guys, because I just want to sort of touch on this, and it'll give you a bit of an idea on why I'm sort of. This is the stuff I run. They reckon it lifts it by 7 numbers. Right, so just for example, even if it worked half the strength of what they advertised, well, it's going to get me up around 101 sort of thing, 102 octane. Well, this is really quite hard to start at 13 degrees of timing. This engine here would be just on around 9-to-1 compression, and it's quite a lazy, now that I'm only actually using up the last of what I had with the other engine. So it is quite hard to start. I did struggle there in the last, especially the other day I tried to start it, and it was really hard to start. Yes, I could probably sneak it up a few degrees and try and encourage a little bit more combustion there, but yeah. But what I was getting at is if I was running E85, it would only compound the problem even more. That's got an octane rating of around 105 to 7, and I thought, it's not a real. That's the last thing I need, is hassles and trying to get it going and trying to advance it up and all that sort of jazz. And it was availability too. Around a half-hour drive, 40-minute drive just to go and get it. And it does attract water. It's shocking for that if you're trying to store it. So there was a few negatives for me, and this is why I've sort of stuck with the 98, because I know it's 98, and that was the other thing too, guys. After learning a lot more about it, the ethanol content can vary, and I'm not sure in Tasmania where I live whether they've sort of shandied it back a little bit to make it a little bit easier for the general public on their cars to start, because we do cop a bit of cooler weather, so whether that concentration comes down to 70%, 60%, I don't know. And that was another thing that sort of put me off too, because if you're tuning for, say, an E85 tune, we don't really know what you're getting at the end of the day, unless you've got some sort of sensor or a fuel sensor in there to pick up the ethanol content. And a lot of newer cars now, and there's a lot of people with turbocharged engines that are running the flex fuel system, so they can determine the ethanol content and they will tune it accordingly. Whereas this is old school, and I can't sort of just get out and just turn the fuel, turn the dizzy back a little bit because the content's sort of dropped, and that was something I sort of put me off a little bit. Whereas I know with the fuel, the 98, it would be, that's actually sold as a performance fuel. So you know that you're getting a minimum of 98 octane. So you can tune with that and the methanol water injection, because every time you do your brew will stay the same. You do a 50-50 brew, so you can tune and you know that it's very consistent, the fuel with the water methanol. And that was the real benefit for me, sort of staying with that and going with the water methanol. Now, I got onto I've just seen some really good videos, and I'll put the link up at the end of it, guys, in the comments. They call themselves Tuning School. I'm actually subscribed to them, but they did a series on different fuels: E85, ethanol, race fuels, C16, all the sort of fuels that were quite popular, and this is in the States. And they did just a horsepower comparison, and it was really interesting. And I won't go too much into it, but like I said, I'll put the link up in the comments so you can have a bit of a look and check it all out. They did a test on the E85, and they did a flex fuel content on it, and it was only 40%. Thinking, and these guys were down in Florida, so thinking they were getting sort of the recommended sort of 70, 80, 85%, they weren't. So there's another thing. You don't see, like I said earlier, you just don't know what you're going to get. Anyway, they did a test on that basis, and they ended up doing I think it was 93, and I think that's equivalent to our 98 here. And that was only like that comparison with the water methanol injection with the 98 over the E85 at 40%. It was only, I think it was only about 8 or 9 horsepower at the rear wheels difference. Then they did a test with just pure methanol, and the comparison again with the E85 only came up within a couple of horsepower. So it was a fair old difference in horsepower increase with running straight meth. So that's another option I could go down if I feel wanting to wring a little bit more out of it or up the tune, whatever. I can run pure methanol into it. So that's why I'm sort of really keen on this sort of system over the methanol too. And you've got to remember, not the methanol, the E85. And you've got to remember too, guys, the E85, they reckon you need around sort of 25% more volume of fuel over pump fuel. So it's just something to consider there. And it is a very corrosive fuel. So yes, it's got its benefits. And I think if you were living in a really warm climate, like in a sort of subtropical climate, I think E85 is really well worth the effort. But where I live in a sort of a very temperate climate, we have really cool winters, and we only have a sort of the warmer time in the year for a couple, maybe 3 months of that year. We sort of hover around the mid-20, sort of 5 degrees Celsius, and the rest of it's sort of well under 20 degrees, so we're around the 15 degree mark in Tasmania. So staying with the pump fuel, a lot easier to start, a lot more sort of reliable octane setting, which I know that what I put in the car it'll suit the tune. I don't have any variants, and I don't have to put any flex fuel sensors in there and try and read the content and worry about all that. For me, this is the ultimate setup. So yeah, I'll put a link in the comments, like I said earlier, and it's quite interesting. It really is. So yeah, all right, folks. Well, that's a little look into the fuels, and yeah, I'll show. Oh, hang on, I'll show you before I go. I did a little mod. The Mod Father. I've renamed my channel underneath, and I've called it the Mod Father. I think it was Mike called me the Mod Father, and it just stuck with me, so I'll run with it now. I think it's a great thing. I'll show you what I did there, guys. I did a little mod on the... Oh, there it is. You can see there. I put some holes. Jez commented and was worried about the zippy ties coming undone, and I sort of thought it might happen too, you know, and stick the throttle open. So I ended up putting holes in it, and yeah, that ensures that we don't have any zippy ties fly off. Yeah. All right, folks. Well, I've got her back up on the stands and just checking her over again, and I've actually my rear panhard rod. I've got a small bit of a bracket there. It's sort of cracked away, and I've sort of I've got to repair that. So I've sort of die grinded it all back, and I'm going to TIG weld it. So do a nice job with that. So yeah, other than that, she's all ready to rock and roll. But the next job, guys, I'm going to do those back arms. I'm really quite pumped on that now, and we'll set the geometry up for the pinion angle on the diff, because what's happening is as the car drops, it's nosing the diff down, and that's changing the pinion angle at the bottom, and it's not the same off the rear of the gearbox. You know, it's supposed to be sort of in a nice equal plane. And the trouble is, at the minute, as the suspension comes up, the bloody nose of the diff sort of noses down, and I get this little bit of vibration. And that's because those top arms I've got, they're too much angle on them like that. They've just run out of travel, so they're pulling on the diff and nosing it down. So yeah, it's a real hassle, but I'm just going to have to come up through into the car with it, and that's the only way to sort of fix it. But anyway, look, I'll go into depth over it, and yeah, it's all good, all exciting times, and I'm really loving it at the moment. So it's nice to have this thing all sort of running again, and yeah, it's a good feeling, it really is. All right, folks, well, I'll put one up soon, and I'll catch you later.